She was still wiping the rice pot when the door slammed open. Her mother froze beside the hearth. The smoke curled around her still form like a warning. A chill swept through the room even though the fire still burned low. The girl didn't turn at first, she knew better. She had heard that slam before. She knew what followed it. But tonight something was different. There was no slurred voice, no complaint about the food or the roof. Only the heavy sound of boots soaking the floor with rain. "Where is she?" her stepfather asked. His voice was steady. That scared her more. She turned slowly, hands still damp with starch. He was staring right at her, his face unreadable, jaw twitching once. Behind him, the door groaned as wind shoved against it. Her mother didn't speak. The silence told her everything. Her heart thudded. "I didn't?" "You were born stubborn," he said and took a rope from under his coat. It was thick and dark with rain. It looked like it had been used before. "Your blood runs hot. You think too much. Look too long. So we will teach your body to kneel even if your spirit will not." The girl stared at the rope, not comprehending. "I didn't do anything today." He stepped forward. "Exactly. You didn't bow when the chief's son passed. You didn't lower your eyes. You think I didn't hear? I didn't see him?" Her mother flinched. "Please?" But the man turned to her sharply. "It's time. You agreed when we married. You said we'd raise her right." Her mother's face crumpled but she nodded. "Just don't leave marks." That part was whispered. But the girl heard it. It was worse than shouting. He walked around her and wrenched her arms backward. She cried out as the tendons in her shoulders screamed. The rope looped around her elbows, yanking them together unnaturally. Her back arched against the strain. Her knees gave out. She landed hard on the packed earth floor. The pain was immediate and hot and everywhere. "No," she gasped. "No, no." Her stepfather said nothing. Her mother turned away. Not out of cruelty, but because she couldn't bear to look. They dragged her outside, through the puddles gathering in the yard. Chickens scattered. The sky was already bruising with the coming storm. Rain tapped against the leaves in warning. The girl's knees hit the ground, splashing cold water. She fell forward but couldn't catch herself, bound as she was. The impact smacked her cheek into the mud. "Up," he growled. She rolled to her side, struggling to rise, her shoulders now pulsing with white-hot agony. She finally managed to get upright, kneeling, her arms tied cruelly behind her. Mud caked her legs, soaked her thin skirt. Rain pelted her head like tiny fists. "This," her stepfather announced, stepping back like he was a prophet, "is the first knot. Every girl like her must wear it at least once. If you can't be soft in the heart, we will soften the bone. If your tongue is too quick, we will still it with silence. If your back won't bend, we will teach it how." The girl looked up at him through strands of wet hair. "Tradition," he said. As if that word could wash away anything. She breathed hard, rainwater running down her face and mixing with something warm at the edge of her mouth. Blood maybe. Her lip had split from the fall. She tasted iron. She blinked once. Her mother was standing just behind him, face turned away, clutching her shawl like it could save her from watching her daughter become something smaller. The girl didn't scream again. Not out loud. But inside something cracked. The pain in her shoulders worsened as time dragged on. It didn't ebb, it sharpened. The rope didn't just bind her, it cut into her, biting flesh with every shift. The cold from the rain settled into her bones. Thunder rolled in the distance. Her breath steamed in the air even though the rain was warm. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Pain has a way of swallowing time whole. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. Her fingers were going numb. She tried to focus on the ground. Each drop that splashed into the puddle. The worms emerging from the soaked soil. The smell of wet clay and wood smoke. Anything but the agony crawling up her spine. She remembered when her mother used to braid her hair. That was before. Before the remarriage. Before silence replaced lullabies. Before her voice started sounding too much like questions and not enough like obedience. Now her mother only brushed it quickly, roughly, when anyone was watching. And when no one was. She didn't touch it at all. The girl shifted again. Her knees were raw. She was shivering. Her stomach clenched from hunger but also fear. She looked up. The compound was quiet now. The neighbors had gone inside, closed their shutters, drawn their curtains. She knew they saw. The old woman across the path, the boys who threw stones near the goats, the auntie who sold cassava, they had all looked once and then looked away. That was the worst part. Not the rope. Not the pain. The knowing that no one would stop it. Thunder cracked again, louder this time. The sky was fully open now, pouring down like a punishment or a baptism. She couldn't tell which. Her hair hung limp and wet around her face. Her cheeks were numb. But her eyes were not. She still saw. And somewhere beneath the pain, beneath the bindings and bruises, she still thought. She didn't know how long they'd keep her like this. The knot would stay until her spirit was ready, he'd said. Ready for what? She didn't ask. Her stepfather had gone back inside. The door creaked shut. A small mercy, now she was alone. But the pain didn't care about solitude. It bloomed bigger in the silence. Her arms felt like they might tear from her sockets. And yet she did not cry. The rain soaked her completely, washing away any trace of comfort. But her tears did not come. Not because she was strong. But because even tears require permission sometimes. She had none left to give. At some point, when the clouds rolled in thicker, when the trees began to sway and groan, the wind picked up. A gust swept through the courtyard, knocking over a tin basin. It clanged loudly, startling a rooster nearby. The girl didn't flinch. But she felt it, that shift in the air. Like something ancient had stirred beneath the mud. Something listening. She lowered her head. A low hum rose in her throat, unbidden. A sound from nowhere. Or maybe from memory. It sounded like her mother once long ago. A song sung in the dark when the baby wouldn't sleep. When shadows grew teeth. She hummed softly. Even with the pain. Especially with it. And beneath her knees, she swore she felt the earth breathe. Only once. Only for a second. But it was enough to make her lift her eyes to the sky. The sky cracked open again, another long ripple of thunder rolling across the land like a groan from something ancient and tired. It had been raining since the girl was tied in the courtyard, the knots in her arms soaking through, becoming slick with mud, her clothes clinging like second skin. She wasn't crying. Not yet. But every drop from the sky felt heavier than the last, as if the rain itself were punishing her alongside the rope. Behind the glass-paned window, her stepsister watched. The girl could barely see her at first, just a silhouette, a pale face outlined in warm, dry light. But when the lace curtain fluttered, stirred by some unseen hand or breeze, the full image came into view. Her stepsister, dry as bone, lips curled in a faint smirk, one hand tucked beneath her chin as if observing a painting. She always had that look. Like someone attending a performance. And for her this was exactly that. Not just punishment but spectacle. The girl shifted on her knees, trying to move without slipping. The wet ground had begun to churn beneath her, soft and squelching, threatening to swallow her whole. Her knees had sunk an inch already, and the cold leached into her bones. She couldn't remember how long she had been kneeling. Time was a blurry stretch of gray and brown now. Her arms, tied behind her back, had gone numb. Her shoulders screamed with each movement. Another clap of thunder echoed, and behind the glass, the stepsister tilted her head slightly as if listening to applause. The window framed her like a portrait. She was wearing one of her mother's shawls, the expensive one, woven with gold thread. The shawl hung loose over her arms as if she were posing for an artist. She didn't blink. She just watched. The girl outside lowered her head. A group of boys passed the gate, feet splashing in puddles. They paused to look. No one said a word. One boy whispered something and the others snickered. They stood a little too long staring. The girl didn't move. She knew better. Sometimes stillness was safer. Is she in trouble again? One boy finally asked. Her stepfather says she talks too much, said another. That's not why, whispered a girl from behind them. They said she walks at night. They said she carries knives in her sleep. No, they said she lies, came another voice. About her real father. That he was a prince. The group of children broke into laughter. She thinks she's a tree, one boy said, throwing a pebble. It bounced off her shoulder. Another boy followed. This one hit her leg. Say something, one girl jeered. She won't, the first boy said. She's not allowed. Her stepfather said if she talks again, he'll sew her lips shut. More laughter. One of the boys mimicked her kneeling, raising his arms like wings before pretending to fall over into the mud. They all laughed again and ran, their sandals slapping the puddles as they went. The girl didn't look up. Inside the house, movement caught her eye again. The curtain had drawn back further now. Her stepsister had a bowl in her lap, dates, plump and glossy. She plucked one slowly, brought it to her mouth and bit. The skin broke, the fruit glistened. She chewed slowly as if timing each bite to match the thunder. The girl's stomach twisted, not from hunger but from something deeper, something raw. Rain pelted her face, but the sting of the fruit in her stepsister's hand stung more. That fruit had been meant for a guest. A special visitor. But when the visitor didn't arrive, too much rain, too little interest, The treat had been passed to the favored one. Always her. Her mother hadn't said a word. Earlier, when the stepfather made the announcement, without warning, without cause, her mother had only looked down. She didn't speak. She didn't plead. She didn't stop them as they pulled the girl from the house and bound her arms. It's tradition, the stepfather had said. The girl hadn't even asked what for. Now, in the courtyard, soaked and shivering, her lips numb from silence and cold, she stared at the earth beneath her knees. Mud was beginning to form shapes, rivulets winding like veins, cracks appearing like maps. It looked like a place she knew in a dream, a path winding into something dark. A village elder passed. A tall woman wrapped in blue cloth, sandals scraping against the stones. She paused at the edge of the courtyard. Their eyes met briefly. The elder's gaze was unreadable, something between pity and indifference. Then she turned and walked on, not saying a word. More footsteps passed. A woman carrying a jug of water. A man with a basket of yams. A group of girls returning from the well. All of them slowed. Some looked. None lingered. It's a family matter, someone muttered once long ago. And that excuse had been passed down like a prayer. No one interfered in family matters. Not here. A flash of lightning lit the sky. For a moment, the girl's shadow stretched long and strange across the muddy ground. It looked like someone taller. Someone with arms spread like wings. The shadow flickered and vanished as the thunder cracked. Behind the window, her stepsister had finished her dates. She rose slowly, hands brushing crumbs from her lap. She didn't close the curtain. She left it open, a final gesture, one that said, yes, I saw you. Yes, I enjoyed it. The girl shut her eyes. Rain kept falling. The rope at her wrists tightened as the fibers swelled. Her shoulders burned. Her mouth tasted like ash. She remembered something. The song. A line from something her real father once sang before he vanished, before her mother stopped speaking of him altogether. Even the ground listens if you bleed quietly. She didn't know what it meant. But she bled quietly now, if not from the skin then from the soul. From shame, from the cold rain that soaked her down to the bones. From the weight of all the eyes that had seen and done nothing. And somewhere deep in the earth, a sound stirred. It was too faint to call thunder. Too soft to be wind. But it was not silence. It was something else. Something listening. Something just beneath the surface. Something that had watched too. The second night came without permission. It didn't ask if she'd survived the first. It simply descended, darker, colder, wetter. The sky did not blink. Neither did she. Her arms were still twisted behind her back, knotted so tightly the ropes had begun to disappear into her flesh. The fibers were soaked now, bloated and swollen like her wrists. They stank of mold and blood. She could feel her own pulse thudding against the damp restraints, slow and syrupy. Every time she moved, if she dared to, there was a tearing sensation beneath her skin, like threads of muscle giving way in protest. But even that pain had dulled now. Her body was learning how to hurt without screaming. She kept her eyes low. She had learned not to look at the house. There was nothing there for her. No warmth. No movement. Only shuttered windows that pulsed occasionally with candlelight. The house was a shadow factory, spitting silhouettes of those who belonged inside. Her stepfather's heavy frame pacing across the back hall. Her mother's thin arms pouring water into bowls. Her stepsister's fluttering laugh, like the snapping of dry leaves underfoot. They hadn't untied her once. Not for food. Not for sleep. Not even to relieve herself. Her knees had sunk deeper into the mud now, swallowed inch by inch. The wet earth clutched at her shins like greedy fingers, sucking her into its mouth. Her ankles were numb, buried and forgotten. And still it rained. The second night's rain was different. It wasn't angry like the first, when thunder cracked and lightning flashed like a whip over the roof. This rain was quieter. Patient. It was the kind of rain that believed in drowning slowly. It wormed its way into her dress, into her hair, into her mouth when she opened it too wide. She tried not to open it anymore. At some point she began to shiver. But not the kind of shiver that brought relief. This was deep trembling. A protest from her bones. She didn't know whether she was cold or just afraid. Or maybe her body had decided to start dismantling itself in the only way it could, quietly, piece by piece. First her fingers, then her elbows, then her spine. She didn't know when the worms came. The first one slithered up from the mud without ceremony, thick and brown and blind. It nudged against her bare foot as if confused by the shape. She wanted to jerk away. But her muscles didn't listen. The worm coiled itself over her toes, then disappeared into the crease of her arch. Another one followed. Then another. She stared at them without blinking. She could still feel. That meant something. She could still feel. Time became difficult to measure. The sky never truly brightened. The rain made sure of that. Daylight was a suggestion, nothing more. People passed again, villagers on their way to market or temple or gossip. Some slowed. Some did not. None stopped. One old woman muttered a prayer as she passed. But it was not for the girl. It was for the sky. A boy threw a stone. It landed near her knees. She didn't flinch. She began to hallucinate. Or maybe the world was shifting. She couldn't tell. The ground pulsed beneath her like a heartbeat. The worms moved in strange patterns. She started to imagine they were spelling something out. Maybe a message. Maybe a map. Her stepfather emerged once, just after noon. She knew it was him by the sound of his boots. Sure. He stood behind her without saying anything for a long time. Then he walked a slow circle around her, inspecting his work. She could smell the meat on his breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was smooth as oil. "Good girls don't rebel," he said, as if that explained everything. "This is how we remind the earth we still know our place. You understand?" She did not answer. He did not expect her to. Later that evening, her mother stepped outside. She didn't approach. She just stood under the wooden eaves, arms folded, shawl wrapped tight. Her eyes were unreadable, washed pale by the drizzle. She did not cry. She did not speak. But she stood there for longer than anyone else had. And when she turned to go, the door took longer to close behind her. That meant something too. By the time night returned, she was drifting. Consciousness came in waves now, short, stinging flashes of awareness followed by long stretches of nothing. She didn't sleep. She floated. Sometimes she imagined her body had sunk completely into the earth, and she was only a memory now. A shadow of a girl. A whisper beneath the roots. She remembered her name. That was important. She whispered it once. Just once. And the rain grew heavier. Then she whispered something else, something more dangerous. Her mother's name. The moment the name passed her lips, something shifted in the soil beneath her. Not the way worms moved. Not the way rain loosened mud. This was deeper. Older. The earth sighed or perhaps exhaled. She wasn't sure. A breeze swept through the courtyard, though the trees did not move. Her shoulders screamed again as if the pain had heard the name too and risen in protest. She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from making a sound. Her mouth filled with blood. Her vision blurred again. But it wasn't the rain this time. The worms stopped moving. They lifted. She blinked. They didn't fall back down. They hovered, just slightly, twitching midair. Then they turned, slowly, all of them facing the same direction. Toward her. Toward the center of her chest. She forgot how to breathe. A new sound rose from the ground. A hum. Low and steady, like something ancient tuning itself back to the world. She could feel it vibrating through her kneecaps, through her spine, into the cavity of her ribs. It felt like a lullaby remembered wrong. The rope around her arms creaked. She looked down. Her wrists were raw, the skin peeled and glistening. But the rope, frayed, swollen, was loosening. Just slightly. As if the knot itself had grown tired. Or as if it had heard the name too. The rain paused. Not stopped, just paused. A single heartbeat of stillness. Then thunder cracked like a split sky. The worms dropped. The rope held. The mud swallowed her knees a little deeper. But something had changed. She couldn't say what or how. But she was no longer alone in the earth. The rain no longer felt indifferent. It felt curious, watchful. The worms no longer felt random. They felt summoned. She closed her eyes and leaned forward as much as the rope would allow. Her breath was shallow, her body broken, but her mind was waking. She could still feel. She could still remember. And something had remembered her back. The third night would come soon. But now she waited for it. Not with hope. Not with fear. With knowing. And that was more than she'd had before. The rain had become a rhythm. Not just sound, but sensation. The way it tapped at her scalp, slid down her spine, seeped into the soles of her feet until she couldn't tell where she ended and the world began. The third night came without stars. Only dark upon darker dark, clouds swollen like bruises above her, and the wet slap of rope against her back as the wind tossed it about. Her arms had gone past pain. They had numbed, then stiffened, and now something inside them trembled without her telling it to. The knots at her elbows had tightened during the day, swelled with the rainwater. Every movement now sent a throb through her shoulders, not like fire, but like a weight slowly pulling her apart. She didn't scream. She hadn't made a sound since the first morning. But inside her chest, her lungs had begun to weep quietly with every breath she took. Her knees had sunk deeper into the soil. The wetness, at first a surface thing, now wrapped her like a shroud. Mud crusted around her ankles and tugged at her dress, which had hardened in patches and torn in others. Her skin was blotched with sores where the cold clung longest. The worms had returned, curling through the muck like soft question marks, flicking blindly against her calves. She no longer flinched. A rustle sounded to her left. She didn't raise her head. She didn't need to. She knew the cadence of the window. The faint creak. The hiss of curtain parting. Her stepsister had come again. She always did. 3 times a day at least. Morning, when she stretched like a cat and bit into warm fruit. Noon, when she brought her friends to peer from the parlor and toss seeds down to see if Near would react. And now evening, when the shadows grew and the crows began to sing. The girl behind the glass would tilt her head like a poet and watch, solemnly, as if Near's pain were a performance. A tragic play. One she had paid for in sugar and silk. But Near wasn't performing. She was surviving. It was sometime in the middle of the night when the humming began. At first, it was just the sound of her own blood, or so she thought. A soft drumming, deep and low, pulsing through her skull as the cold crept in again. But then it shifted. Took shape. It came not from her, but under her. Beneath the mud. Beneath the earth itself. She held her breath. There. A hum. Not a wind, not an echo, but a voice. No, not a voice. Voices. It was like listening to a memory that wasn't hers. A chorus made of breath and sorrow, of dirt and dusk. The language was unfamiliar, curling with syllables her tongue did not know. But her bones knew. Her ribs thrummed with the meaning. Her spine tingled with recognition. It wasn't speech, it was story. Something passed down not in words but in roots. In blood. In the stillness between cries. The sound rose in waves. Not loud but layered. One thread sounded like mourning, long and low, dragging like a chain. Another fluttered like wings, sharp and delicate. A third one pulsed like a heartbeat. Together they wrapped around her, filling the space where pain used to be. You are not alone. The message wasn't spoken aloud, but it landed inside her with the heaviness of truth. Her breath steadied. Not because the cold left her, it didn't. Not because the ropes eased, they didn't. But because something had cracked open in the silence and now it was pouring in. For the first time in days she moved her lips. She didn't speak. She mouthed the shape of the sound. A shape like curling vines, like roots splitting stone. The syllables danced on her tongue like heat she hadn't felt in years. Her throat caught. She tried again. Something in the mud shifted. It was so small, so subtle, that she might have missed it if she hadn't been watching. A tiny tremble. The earth, once still, had drawn breath. The soil gave a sigh. Near blinked. Rain slid from her lashes. Her eyes stung, but not from the weather. A warmth curled at her knees. Not heat, not yet. But no longer ice. The mud, which had gnawed at her skin for nights, now softened. Cradled her instead of choking. Her feet, long numbed, began to feel again. The ache returned, but not as agony, as awareness. The voices continued. Some sang. Some wept. Some merely breathed. She tilted her head just slightly. Her neck protested, stiff and aching, but she did it anyway. The ropes scraped at her wrists, but she no longer feared them. Who are you? She whispered, lips barely parting. The mud beneath her pulsed. Child of soil. That's what they had called her before. She remembered now. That first whisper. The name had seemed strange then. But now, as the soil beneath her shivered in recognition, it felt like truth. Child of soil. Not child of the house. Not child of the stepfather who beat silence into her mother. Not child of the mother who now turned her face away to survive. Not sister to the girl behind the glass. Child of something deeper. Older. The next gust of wind didn't cut her. It sang with her. She leaned her head back just slightly and listened. The ground beneath her wasn't just dirt. It was memory. It was womb. It was witness. She felt it stretch under her like a hand, palm up, holding her weight not in pity but in promise. The knots on her arms didn't loosen. But they no longer felt final. Something had changed. It was not loud. It was not bright. But it was real. The mud was no longer just mud. It had become a language. And Near was beginning to understand it. Somewhere inside her chest, the first ember stirred. Not anger. Not yet. But recognition. Remembering. That she had come from somewhere. That someone had held her once and sung to her. That her voice had once been allowed to exist. She tilted her head again, just enough to feel the rain slide along her ear. She mouthed the words again, the one she didn't know but knew. The hum answered. Around her the earth pulsed once more. And above her, inside the house, the girl at the window took one step back. Muir did not see it. But the soil did. And it remembered. The rain stopped sometime in the night, but the cold lingered like a second punishment. Nyala had lost all feeling in her arms by then. They had gone beyond pain into a numbness that felt like death creeping up bone by bone. Her knees, sunk deep in the mud, had begun to swell, and every movement sent a sharp throb up her spine. Still she hadn't cried. Not once. Not in the hours after sunset, when the mosquitoes swarmed and bit at her bloodless skin. Not even when the ropes rubbed the skin raw under her wrists and began to seep with something that felt thick and sticky. She only breathed, deep, slow and steady. She had learned that much from the earth, how to survive without being seen. Light came slowly, as if even the sun hesitated to witness what had become of her. First, a pale gray across the trees, then a cracked pink bruise leaking between the clouds. The compound roofs shimmered with wetness. The muddy yard where she knelt shimmered too, with worms and pebbles and thin trails left by snails. Her breath came in short, clouded bursts. Her lips were cracked open at the sides. Her dress, soaked through, was plastered to her chest, thighs, back. The cloth had torn sometime during the night, she wasn't sure when. She only felt the cold of exposed skin now, and the raw ache of the knots where rope met bone. She heard the door creak open before she saw him. Her stepfather's footsteps were heavy on the porch. She didn't raise her head. Not at first. She waited for the familiar grunt, the scrape of his sandal against the wood, the clink of his belt buckle when he shifted his weight. "Well," he said, not loudly, not softly either. Just the way he always spoke, like his voice was the law and even the sky bent to it. Nyala blinked slowly. The mud on her lashes cracked and flaked. "You're still breathing then?" he muttered. She didn't answer. "You think silence will save you?" Still nothing. She finally looked up, not all the way, just enough that her chin rose slightly and he could see her eyes beneath the mat of wet hair that clung to her brow. Her face was pale, lips nearly purple. But her eyes were not the same ones that had bowed and wept 3 nights ago when the rope first pulled her arms behind her back. Something in them had gone still but not dead. Watching. Listening. Like the soil. He squatted beside her, close enough that she could smell the palm wine from the night before. Close enough to see the flecks of old meat in his beard. "You're lucky," he said, his voice rough now. "Lucky I let you live after what your mother did. You don't even know how lucky." He spat near her face. It landed on the mud inches from her cheek. She didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed. "You think you're better than this?" He jabbed a finger toward the soaked earth. "You were born from dirt, girl. That's what your mother was too. Dirty. Full of secrets. Maybe she cursed you with her tongue. Maybe that's why you can't learn silence properly." Still no reply. Her face was stone. He stood up again, adjusted his belt, and turned toward the house. "Say one word," he called over his shoulder, "and it's another night." The door slammed behind him. She exhaled then. Not a sigh, not a sob, just a slow, even breath like the wind between tree roots. She shifted her knees a little. The mud sucked at her. Her skin peeled in some places where it stuck. But she didn't cry out. Birds were beginning to call now, hesitant notes in the misted air. Somewhere a rooster crowed, late and hoarse. The village was waking. Smoke curled from a few chimneys. The children would be out soon, passing the compound on the way to the well or the bush path to school. She braced herself for the pebbles, for the laughter. Yesterday one boy had thrown a spoonful of cornmeal at her chest and shouted, "Eat, animal!" His mother had scolded him gently but never told him to stop. But this morning was different. She felt it before she saw anything, a faint stirring beneath her knees, beneath the earth itself. A warmth. Not the kind that came from the sun but from below, deep down. The kind that moved slow and full, like breath after drowning. Her fingers twitched. She didn't mean to move them, but they moved anyway. The soil had begun to hum again. Not out loud, not in any way that a passing ear could hear. But in her bones, in the spaces between pain and numbness, something was singing again. That strange language, ancient and wet. The same one she had heard in her sleep. It wasn't just a lullaby anymore. It was a memory. It was home. And with it came the scent of something familiar, oil. Not the burnt smell of frying pans or kerosene lamps. No. This was her mother's scent. Shea butter and camphor, and that special root oil she used on Nyala's scalp every full moon, when the braids were unpicked and the comb ran slow through her hair. It came suddenly, riding the breath of the earth. She wept then. Not loudly. Just 2 tears. They rolled down and disappeared into the dirt, where her mother had once stood years ago holding her with both arms. Her memory a soft hum now rising from the soil itself. Child of storm, the soil whispered. Child of rope. You do not break. She closed her eyes. The sky above lightened. The house behind her groaned as footsteps shifted. Her mother waking, probably already wondering if her silence would be interpreted as disobedience. But Nyala was far away now, sinking into the roots, listening. The rope around her wrists didn't loosen, but it didn't burn either. Her arms still throbbed, but there was something beneath the pain now, a pressure that wasn't entirely hers. A presence. For the first time in days she breathed without shaking. She was not alone. Something ancient had woken. And it had seen her. The third night fell heavy, like a punishment that had taken form and draped itself across the sky. Clouds swelled low, hanging just above the trees like swollen bruises. The wind had changed direction too, brushing against the village with an unfamiliar chill, like the breath of something ancient stirring awake. Nia remained where she was, arms still knotted behind her back, knees sunk deep in the earth, dress pasted to her skin like wet paper, bones aching from the cold and the knots. Her head tilted forward, her forehead resting against the damp soil. Her ears throbbed with silence. But it wasn't silence. The rain returned, but this time it didn't sound the same. It didn't fall like it had before, like cold lashes or heaven's indifference. It came gentler at first, a patter with weight. Then came a strange scent, riding in the downpour, iron, like rust or blood, and something faintly sweet, like crushed blossoms wilting on stone. Nia lifted her head slightly and blinked through strands of hair. The rain wasn't clear anymore. It shimmered silver under the moonlight, each drop gleaming like it carried something, not light but memory. Her first thought was that she was hallucinating. Her body was too broken, too exhausted, too soaked. Maybe her brain had slipped into dreaming while her eyes were still open. But then she saw the streaks trailing down her arms. The water left marks. Not red, not crimson, but gray. Pale and silken like watered ink on old parchment. And the smell, not just in her nose now but settling in her mouth, behind her eyes, in her lungs. Flowers and blood. From the windows, a few villagers watched uneasily, their faces tucked behind curtains. Mothers who had daughters, fathers who once held crying babies in the crook of their elbows, now stood very still. One woman stirred in her bed, frowning in her sleep. Another woke up choking, clutching her throat, sobbing with no idea why. A little boy sat up in the dark and whispered, "She's cold," though no one was beside him. The village didn't rest that night. The rain didn't let them. Inside her bones, Nia felt something shift. Her spine, which had been curled inward from the weight of punishment, trembled not from pain but from something else, attention. It felt like the earth beneath her had eyes now, had ears, had breath. Not just singing anymore. Something had risen closer. Something was watching with her, not from above, not from the windows, but from below. At the edge of the forest, the soil began to pulse. Very gently at first. Just a patch no bigger than a palm. But then it grew, a soft, rhythmic bulge like breath beneath the dirt. A hare darted out of the underbrush, startled by the tremor, its eyes wide with panic. In the distance, a branch cracked loudly, though no storm wind had come. Something was shifting. Not in the skies but beneath the roots. Her stepfather did not come out that night. Perhaps he was drunk, or perhaps the look in her eyes that morning had crawled under his skin and stayed there. Her mother remained quiet too, though her shadow passed once behind the curtain, fingers white-knuckled on the edge of the frame. No one refilled the bowl of water. No one brought her food. She didn't expect it. Hunger had become background noise, just another voice whispering beside the others. By midnight, her knees were so numb she couldn't tell if they were still touching the ground or sinking through it. Her body was failing. But her senses, those had become sharper. The smell was changing again. The scent of rain was turning into something older. Charcoal. Dirt after fire. The smell of a grave that had not been opened in centuries. Yet it wasn't rot. It wasn't decay. It was return. And then she heard it. The lullaby again, the same as before but louder now. Not just inside her dreams. It poured into her ears like the rain did into her clothes. The same tune, the same rhythm she'd heard whispered under her breath, in the back of her memories. But now the voice was clearer. Feminine. Oh. Not young, not old, but ancient in a way that made all her pain feel small. It sang with grief and promise. She opened her mouth and tried to hum along. No sound came out. Her throat was too dry. But her lips moved. Her shoulders shifted slightly. The rope pulled harder. She winced, but she didn't stop. The mud beneath her knees began to warm just a little. She didn't know if it was her body giving up or something else, something that had finally truly begun to rise. At the edge of the woods the ground split. Just a crack. A thin, jagged line that hadn't been there before. A line that hissed steam as silver rain fell into it. The roots of nearby trees pulsed once as if something had tugged them from below. A fox sleeping near its den woke with a shriek and darted away. The trees leaned slightly, just slightly, in her direction. She didn't see that, but she felt it. Her spine straightened little by little. She didn't will it, it moved on its own. The knots in her arms didn't loosen, but the ache dulled. Her head tilted upward. Rain slid down her cheeks, gathering in the hollows of her collarbone. She tasted it. It tasted like memory. Like salt and ash and the first time someone held her gently. And then she remembered something, a moment from when she was very young, barely 5. Her mother oiling her scalp, humming low, whispering, "Let the rain kiss your crown, not crush it." That memory had been gone. Or stolen. Or buried. But the rain had brought it back. From the hut beside the compound, her stepsister stirred in her bed and blinked toward the window. She saw the glow first, not lightning but something low to the earth. She sat up, mouth dry, pressing her nose to the glass. Her eyes widened. The mud pit shimmered. Just faintly. Like silver dust swirled in the water. And the girl in the middle, that broken thing they'd left to kneel and rot, she was rising. Not standing, not yet. But lifting. Her shoulders looked broader. Her hair no longer clung flat. It hung in strands thick as vines, catching the glow of the gray rain. She backed away from the window, heart pounding. Elsewhere, in neighboring compounds, little girls began to cry in their sleep. Some awoke and stared out their doorways. Others whimpered the name Nier, though they'd never spoken to her. Dogs barked and refused to come near. One old man woke gasping and murmured, "It's her. It's the child they bound." The rain continued to fall. But now it no longer hit the ground with the same force. Around Nier's knees, it began to drift instead, hovering slightly above the surface like mist. It did not soak her anymore. It circled her. Flowed across her skin in ribbons, tracing the path of old bruises and recent burns. It cooled her wrists. It soothed her shoulders. And then, without warning, it began to twist, forming a tiny whirlpool in the bowl of earth between her legs. Nier stared at it. Her breath came slow and steady. Her lips moved again. She whispered a name. Her mother's. The ground trembled. Somewhere in the distance a tree fell. A long, slow groan followed by the thunder of roots being ripped from ancient beds. The crack in the forest widened slightly. And deep within it, just for a second, something golden flickered. Nier didn't flinch. She knelt there, silver rain sliding around her, and watched as the worms that once curled at her feet now buried themselves again, not in fear but as if yielding to her. The third night had not broken her. It had baptized her. The rain didn't stop, but it slowed just enough for her to hear the shift in its rhythm. It no longer beat down like an angry drum, it wept softly as if in mourning. She blinked through swollen lids and lifted her head, breath catching on something strange in the air. The smell of wet soil was familiar by now, but now there was something else. Smoke, maybe, or memory. She squinted through the curtain of mist and shadow. Shapes moved. Not the villagers. Not the dogs. They were quieter than ghosts, more solid than spirits. Girls. They came barefoot across the mud but left no prints. The rain didn't touch them. Their dresses clung like hers did, but they didn't shiver. Some were younger than her, others older. One wore a necklace of cowrie shells. Another had hair braided in an old pattern, one her mother used to do before everything broke. And all of them had eyes that glowed faintly, not like fire but like the underside of thunderclouds, lit from within. Nier's breath caught in her throat. Her knees trembled, though she'd knelt so long she thought she couldn't feel her legs anymore. They didn't speak. Not with mouths. But still she heard them. "We remember." The words stirred not in her ears, but in her chest as if planted there long ago. They came closer, not walking so much as drifting, just above the ground as if even the mud did not dare claim them anymore. And when they stopped just a few feet away, Nier felt the warmth rise, not from her skin, not from the world, but from somewhere deeper, under the soil. The one with the cowrie shell necklace stepped forward. Her eyes met Nier's. "You are not the first." Her lips didn't move. The rain parted slightly above her head, a crown of stillness in the storm. "But you are the first to remain whole." Nier tried to speak, but her lips cracked when they parted. Her tongue was dry, her throat swollen. Still she forced the word out. "Who Who are you? The girl with the shells didn't blink. Asterisk, we are the ones who knelt before. We waited. Now we rise. Asterisk. Something moved along Nir's arms. She flinched, thinking it was another worm or insect, but the sensation was too precise. The ropes, torn and tight, digging in for days, began to tremble. Not by her effort. Not by strength. The fibers twitched, then stretched. Her pain, so familiar it had become like a second skin, suddenly faded. One of the other girls, older, her hair long and loose like tree roots, lifted a hand. Asterisk, your blood knew us. The soil knows you. It is time. Asterisk. With a soft, almost reverent motion, the girl with the cowries extended her hand. She didn't touch the ropes, but Nir felt warmth spread through her limbs, like fire made of memory. And then the first knot, the one that had held her arms twisted behind her back since that first awful night, snapped. No sound. Just release. The second knot unraveled, not all at once, but with a slow, dragging pull that made her skin prickle. It was like the ropes were giving up, ashamed. The girls watched silent. When the last loop fell away and her arms dropped forward, she didn't scream, even though the blood rushing back made her dizzy. She only bowed her head, letting it fall so her chin touched her chest, like a leaf finally falling after clinging through storms. One of the girls knelt beside her, not on the ground, still untouched by it, but close enough to whisper. Asterisk, you are not alone. Never again. Asterisk. Then all at once the girls began to fade. Not like smoke, not like ghosts. They simply stepped back into the storm and vanished, the way sunlight leaves a forest when dusk falls, quietly all at once. Nir sat there, untied, wet, trembling, but not broken. She looked down at her wrists. The rope marks were deep, red and raw. But they pulsed faintly with light now, as if the pain had been turned into something alive, something waiting to speak. The rain began again, harder now, but it couldn't touch her the same way. It rolled off her skin differently, confused. She lifted her head. Somewhere in the distance, thunder cracked. And she knew, the night wasn't over. But neither was she. The rain had stopped making noise. It was still falling, but it had forgotten how to thunder. It slid from the sky like a curtain being drawn, gentle and heavy, but silent. That silence was what woke her, not a sound but the absence of it. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Even the wind had tucked itself away. Nir opened her eyes slowly. They no longer stung. The ache in her shoulders, the burn in her wrists, muted now. She expected to feel the tug of the ropes again, the weight of restraint. But her arms, they hung freely at her sides, motionless but loose, like they had simply returned to her after a long journey. The ground beneath her felt softer. Not warm, not dry, but soft, like something had shifted during the night. Something that had once pressed against her spine was gone. She blinked and looked down. No ropes. Only the marks. Angry red lines across her wrists and forearms, like roots trying to break through her skin. They throbbed slightly, not with pain but with memory. She lifted one arm and turned it slowly in front of her. The air caught on the wounds and whispered against them. Then, something strange began to happen. The marks shimmered. Just for a moment. A thin, ghostly light moved across them, like a thread being pulled through, like someone tracing her past with moonlight. And then, they began to fade. Not quickly, not entirely. But enough that she could feel them leave. Not erased, transformed. She stood. Not all at once. Her legs shook, her balance swayed. But she rose without hands to steady herself, without anyone to pull her up. The mud tried to hold her knees, then let go. Her breath came deep and strong. For the first time in days, her chest felt like it belonged to her. The sky hung low and swollen, its belly full of silver water. Rain still fell, but none of it touched her. She took a step forward. Her bare foot landed in a puddle, but it didn't splash. The water parted around her skin like smoke pulled by wind. She stepped again. Same thing. The storm was there, loud and thick and wild just a few steps away, but it bent away from her, veered around her. Nir walked forward slowly. The world around her watched. The leaves stopped shaking. The wind hid behind the trees. Even the birds, those that should have been waking, were silent, unsure. She walked past the post where she had been tied. The wood was split now. Cracks ran through it like lightning had whispered down its spine. The ropes lay at its base, wet and useless. Frayed ends curled like burned paper. She didn't look back. The edge of the village came into view, flickers of light behind walls, shapes of sleeping homes. She could hear them breathing. The people. They slept, not knowing what the rain had failed to wash away. They dreamed behind locked doors while the sky changed its laws and the earth gave back what they tried to bury. She walked slowly toward the path that led to her mother's house. Her footsteps didn't echo. They didn't squelch or stick in the mud. They simply were, quiet but certain. Each one pressed into the earth like a signature. The rain followed her like a veil, thick behind her, open before her. Around her, it shimmered, not clear but smoky, silver-edged, like it knew her now and would not dare touch her again. Nier did not smile. There was nothing joyful in her face. But there was calm. And in that calm, something powerful stirred, something even the night could not deny. She passed under the old almond tree. Its branches, always bending toward the road, now leaned slightly away from her, not in fear but in reverence. Another step. Another breath. The house waited. She could see the door now. She could see the place where the window had been broken years ago, where the light never reached. And above it all, the smoke from the hearth rose upward, straight and thin even in the rain. She paused just before the threshold. The storm whispered behind her, restless. She reached forward, touched the wooden doorframe. It hissed beneath her fingertips. Steam rose. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. The house would know. The people inside would know. She was no longer the girl who had been tied. No longer the daughter left kneeling in the mud. She was something else now. The storm did not drench her. The ropes did not hold her. The silence did not frighten her. She walked in. And the rain behind her folded itself back into the clouds, like it had been waiting for her to pass. The door creaked open before her fingers touched it. No wind had pushed it, no hands pulled from inside. It simply opened as though the house itself had known she was coming, had been waiting. She stepped inside. The sound of her entrance was like a breath being drawn in reverse. Not footsteps, not the slap of wet feet against wood, but something older. The floorboards whispered under her weight, then snapped softly where she stepped as though cracking under heat. Her footprints sizzled. Mud hissed into vapor. Each mark she left behind steamed in place for a second, then faded into blackened outlines. The hearth fire dimmed. In the corner of the room, her mother looked up. At first she did not move. Her mouth fell open slowly, her eyes wide and unblinking. In her hands was a bowl she had been preparing. For who, for what, Nier didn't care. The bowl slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, rice scattering like bones. Nier? The word came out in a rasp. Not joy. Not relief. Just disbelief dragged through guilt. Nier said nothing. Her hair clung to her back, drenched but no droplets fell. Her clothes were soaked but no water dripped. She stood tall and silent, a storm wrapped in skin. There was no tremble in her lips, no bend in her spine. Behind her, the rain began to beat again, harder this time, as if trying to catch up, but too late. Footsteps from the next room. Her stepfather appeared, yawning, shirt half-buttoned, scratching his belly like he had risen from a comfortable dream. He glanced at the broken bowl, the steam on the floor, the smoke curling from the doorway, and then he saw her. And froze. How? His voice broke before the question could finish. His eyes darted to the door, then to her feet, then back to her face. His lip curled, not in a sneer but in confusion. In disbelief. In fear. You're supposed to, he started. He lifted his hand. Instinct, habit, violence. The same hand that had dragged her by the hair, the same arm that had shoved her against the doorpost, the same palm that had flicked boiling water just close enough to blister. But it stopped. Midair. His elbow locked. His wrist bent backward with a shiver. His fingers clawed at something invisible. His breath caught in his throat. Nier stared at him. Her gaze was level and silent. No rage. No tears. Just presence. That was enough. His knees buckled. He staggered backward, cradling the arm that still would not move. His body hunched like it had aged 20 years in a blink. He pressed against the wall, panting through clenched teeth. "What are you?" he hissed as if spitting out the last piece of something rotten. Still she didn't speak. She walked past him. He did not stop her. She moved through the house like smoke through a hollow, leaving heat in her wake. The floor darkened under her. The very walls leaned away from her shadow. Every mirror, every reflective surface, from polished pots to broken glass, fogged over as she passed. She moved through each room slowly. Not searching. Claiming. She entered the space where she had once slept, the corner of the floor behind the cupboard. The mat was gone. Her little pot of salt overturned. The tin cup missing. Everything they had denied her had been cleaned away, like she was meant to be forgotten. She knelt anyway. Pressed her palm to the spot where she used to curl into herself, knees to chest, hoping the night would pass quickly. The wood hissed beneath her hand. Smoke rose again. Not thick, not choking, just a signal. A whisper sent from skin to soil. She stood. When she returned to the central room, her mother was still by the hearth. But something had shifted. Her shoulders had fallen forward. Her eyes glistened now with more than just fear. Her mouth opened again, but words would not come. She stepped forward. "Don't," Nier said. One word. That was all. The air went still. Her voice had changed. It was not louder, not deeper, but it carried weight. It settled on the room like ash after a fire. Her mother stopped in place. Her stepfather let out a choked breath and slid down the wall, sweat beading on his brow. Nier walked to the center of the house. She looked up at the thatched ceiling, then down at the cracked floor. She opened her mouth once more and let out a sound, not a word, not a cry. A hum. Low and soft. The same hum that had come from the soil, from beneath the earth, those nights when she had been tied. That song of buried voices. That ancient language without letters. She hummed it, and the house trembled in its joints. Dust fell from the rafters. The fire in the hearth died. And then, nothing. Only silence. Nier turned toward the door. She walked out without another word. Behind her the air cleared, but the heat remained. Her footprints stayed burned into the floor, 12 blackened shapes like brands. The house did not breathe again until she was gone.